A big part of my job in helping a family through intra-household aggression is sort of being able to predict the future. Now, obviously, I can't really predict the future. But with intra-household aggression, it is possible to sort of look at the entire picture and find areas where future conflict is likely and or where low-level conflict is likely already occurring and being missed. So one of our first steps with any behavior case is to put management into place. And with intra-household aggression, that means that we don't want the pets in question having any negative interactions. So that's full-out fights, but it's also really tense moments. There may also be areas where there's not tension currently, but the chances of tension occurring in the future and or the chances of fights occurring there in the future are significant. And we want to put management around those spaces as well, because our goal is to prevent negative interactions so that the relationship doesn't keep deteriorating. And of course, to prevent fights so that no one is physically injured, including the humans. And our goal is to keep stress levels down. Imagine if you were living with a roommate who sometimes escalated to really scary, violent behavior. Those would be our fights. But a lot of times was also just like really rude or a bit threatening, was shooting you dirty looks. That would continue to wear away at your sense of safety and your relationship with this person. So in intra-household aggression cases, we know that the three most common catalysts are tight spaces, arousal, and resource guarding. So let's say I have a situation where the fights are breaking out due to resource guarding of the human in the house. And I learn that with toys, one of the dogs will often take toys from the other dog. I'm also going to want to put management around that scenario. Even if the other dog lets the first dog just take their toy, even if it doesn't escalate to aggression, because it's going to wear and tear on the relationship, and because the potential that it could escalate is high. And that can be hard for folks to wrap their head around when they have like a 5-year history of dog A taking dog B's toys with no escalation. But that same client might be saying to me, we reached out because fights have escalated in the last 6 months. And part of the reason that these things tend to escalate, whether it's we go from no fights to fights, or we go from less frequent, less intense fights to more frequent, more intense fights, can be because of these interactions that are less than fights, but still tense and negative. If I have a dog who, from inside of the house, reacts to things outside of the house and then redirects on their sibling, and then that same behavior happens in the yard, but in the house it's a fight, in the yard it's something less than a fight, I need to put management around the behavior that's happening out in the yard as well. It likely hasn't escalated to a fight yet, because there's more space, but there's a high likelihood that it could. And even if it doesn't escalate to a fight, again, we're still practicing unwanted behaviors. We're still deteriorating the relationship. And in intra-household aggression, every interaction is incredibly important. It's so important that these interactions be neutral or positive. Every time we have a negative interaction, it deteriorates the relationship that we're working so hard to rebuild. And in intra-household cases, we usually can't afford that cost. Now, every case is a little bit different, but generally, by the time I see intra-household cases, not always, but generally, we have either had very high-level fights or we're having a higher frequency of fights. I very rarely get cases where the primary concern is intra-household aggression and we haven't had a fight yet. Although sometimes that does happen, and I get to say things like, let's keep this relationship positive. But most commonly, we don't have a lot of wiggle room for negative interactions. And so that being able to look into the future and say, where might fights occur? Where might conflict occur? Where is lower level conflict occurring that's being missed? Because it's really subtle to us humans, but really loud to the pets in question. That's one reason I think that in intra-household cases, it can be really helpful to work with someone who specializes in intra-household aggression. Like with separation anxiety, I think it's important to work with someone who specializes in separation anxiety, like a CSAT.